At my wife Beatrice's funeral, the rain was falling hard against the black umbrellas, but it was not as cold as the look my son Jason gave me. He stood across the open grave, his arm around his wife Megan, and neither of them shed a single tear. When the service ended, and the few mourners began to drift away toward their cars, Jason walked up to me. I expected a hug. I expected shared grief. Instead, he leaned in close, his breath smelling of mints and arrogance, and spat the words that would seal his fate. "You are dead to us too, old man. Mom was the only reason we pretended to care. Now that she is in the ground, you are nothing." Megan smirked and checked her watch. "We have already called the real estate agent," she added. "You need to be out of the big house by the end of the week. We are selling it." I stood there, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces, realizing my wife had been right about them all along. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick, dark red envelope. "Then here is your mother's last wish," I said. My voice trembling, not with sadness, but with a cold new fury. I pressed it against his chest. The entire churchyard went silent as he tore it open. He expected a check. He expected an inheritance. But what he found inside made the blood drain from his face and changed our lives forever. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, please like and subscribe to the channel. My name is Conrad Blackwood. I am 70 years old, and this is the story of how I taught my ungrateful son the hardest lesson of his life. The Seattle sky was a bruised shade of purple, weeping a steady, freezing drizzle that soaked through the shoulders of my old wool coat. I stood at the edge of the hole in the earth that was about to swallow the only person who had ever truly known me. Beatrice. My Bee. 50 years of marriage. 50 years of building bridges, literally and metaphorically, only to end here in the mud. The priest was a young man who did not know us reciting standard verses about dust returning to dust, but my eyes were not on the mahogany casket. They were fixed on the two people standing 10 feet away. Jason, my only son, was 38 years old, but in that moment he looked like a petulant child bored with a timeout. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, a flashy Italian cut that was too tight in the shoulders, trying desperately to project the image of a successful entrepreneur. But I knew the truth. I knew the seams were bursting both on the jacket and on his life. Beside him stood Megan, his wife of 5 years. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving rhythmically against the screen, the blue light reflecting off her oversized sunglasses. She was checking social media during her mother-in-law's burial. I tightened my grip on the handle of my umbrella until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them. Beatrice had loved that boy with a fierceness that defied logic. She had defended him when he failed out of college the first time. She had cushioned his fall when his first startup collapsed due to what he called bad luck and what I knew was laziness. She had been the buffer between my stern discipline and his endless need for shortcuts. And this was how he repaid her. With boredom. With a glance at his watch that said, "Hurry up and put her in the ground so we can get to the reading of the will." The priest finished his prayer. He made the sign of the cross and stepped back. A heavy silence settled over the cemetery, broken only by the rhythmic tapping of the rain on the tent canvas. It was the moment for family to step forward, to throw a handful of dirt, to say a final goodbye. I stepped forward first. My legs felt heavy like I was walking through wet concrete. I picked up the small pile of damp earth and let it fall onto the wood. It made a hollow thud that echoed in the empty chambers of my chest. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "I will handle them. I promise." I stepped back to let Jason take his turn. He sighed a loud, theatrical exhalation of impatience. He walked up, grabbed a pinch of dirt as if it were contaminated, and tossed it carelessly into the grave. He did not say a word. He did not bow his head. He just wiped his hand on his pants and turned around, walking straight toward me. Megan followed, tucking her phone into her designer purse. I thought perhaps this was it. The moment the mask would fall. The moment the reality of death would pierce his narcissism and he would realize he only had one parent left. I prepared myself to offer comfort. I was ready to be the father, the patriarch, to forgive the disrespect of the last hour as a symptom of grief. I was a fool. Jason stopped inches from me. He was taller than me now, or perhaps I had just shrunk under the weight of the years and the secrets I kept. He looked down at me, his eyes cold and hard, devoid of any warmth or history. "Well, that is done," he said. His voice was flat, businesslike. "Jason," I started, my voice raspy. "She loved you very much." He cut me off with a sharp laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Save the sentimental speeches, Conrad. We are not here for that. We are here to make things clear. Conrad. Not Dad. Not Father. Conrad." "What are you talking about?" I asked, feeling a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the rain. "Mom was the peacekeeper," Jason said, crossing his arms over his chest. "She was the only reason we kept coming around for those miserable Sunday dinners. She was the only reason I pretended to listen to your boring stories about building bridges in the 80s. But she is gone. And frankly, I am tired of pretending." Megan stepped up beside him, linking her arm through his. She looked at me with a sneer that twisted her perfectly painted lips. "What Jason is trying to say," she chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "is that the show is over. We do not need you anymore. And we certainly do not want the burden of taking care of a lonely, grumpy old man." I stared at them, blinking against the rain. The cruelty was so naked, so sudden, it took my breath away. It was not just indifference. It was active malice. "You are my son," I whispered. "Not anymore," Jason spat. The words hit me physically like a punch to the gut. "You are dead to us too, old man. Effective immediately. Do not call us. Do not come by the office. And definitely do not expect to see your grandson Leo. We do not want your toxic, old-fashioned influence on him." Leo. My grandson. The sweet 8-year-old boy they had left with a nanny today because funerals are too depressing. The boy who sat on my knee while I showed him how to sketch suspension bridges. They were using him as a weapon. They knew he was my weak point. "And one more thing," Megan added, checking her nails. "The house. The big Victorian on the hill. It is too much for you. We know Mom put both your names on the deed, but we have already spoken to a lawyer. We are going to force a sale. We need our share of the equity now. We have plans, big plans. So you should probably start packing. I hear the state nursing home downtown has a vacancy." She smiled then, a predatory, shark-like smile. They thought they had won. They thought I was just a retired engineer living on a pension, a senile old man driving a 10-year-old Ford truck, helpless without his wife. They looked at my frayed coat and saw weakness. They looked at my tear-stained face and saw defeat. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea that for 40 years I had been the chief engineer for one of the largest infrastructure firms in the Pacific Northwest. They had no idea that I hadn't just built bridges. I had built a fortune. A fortune I had carefully, meticulously hidden to try and teach my son the value of hard work. A lesson he had clearly failed to learn. But more importantly, they had no idea about Beatrice. My wife was a gentle soul, yes. She was kind and loving, but she was not stupid. In the last months of her illness, as the cancer ate away at her strength, her mind had remained as sharp as a diamond. She had seen the way Jason looked at her jewelry when he thought she was sleeping. She had heard the way Megan talked about remodeling our kitchen while Beatrice was lying in the hospice bed in the living room. She had cried not from the pain of the disease, but from the pain of realization. 2 weeks before she died, she had called me to her bedside. She had made me promise. She had handed me a sealed envelope and given me strict instructions. "Conrad," she had wheezed, clutching my hand with her frail fingers. "I hope I am wrong. I pray to God I am wrong about him. But if I am not, if he shows you his true face when I am gone, give him this. Promise me." I had promised. And standing there in the rain, looking at the son who had just declared me dead, I felt the weight of that envelope in the inside pocket of my jacket. It felt heavy like a loaded gun. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wet pine and damp earth. I straightened my spine. The grief was still there, a gaping wound in my soul, but covering it now was a layer of ice. If they wanted the old man to be dead, then the father was dead. And only the engineer remained. The engineer who solved problems. The engineer who removed structural weaknesses before they collapsed the whole system. I looked Jason in the eye. I did not blink, "So that is how it is," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady, calm. "That is how it is," Jason replied, mistaking my calm for resignation. He turned to leave. "Come on, Megan. Let's go grab a drink. This place is depressing." "Wait," I said. He stopped and looked back over his shoulder, annoyed. "What now?" "Do not ask for money because we are cutting you off." "I do not want your money," I said. I reached into my coat. My hand brushed the textured paper of the envelope. I pulled it out. It was a deep blood-red color. Beatrice had chosen it. She said it represented the heart she had given him, and the heart he was breaking. "Your mother left you something," I said. Jason's eyes lit up. Greed is a powerful reflex. It happens faster than thought. He turned around fully. Megan stopped too, her interest piqued. "A check?" Jason asked, stepping closer, his hand already reaching out. Did she have a secret account? I held the envelope out of his reach for a second. I wanted to look at him one last time. I wanted to find the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. I searched his face, but that boy was gone, buried under layers of entitlement and selfishness. "She told me to give you this only if you proved that you did not love us," I said. "She hoped I would never have to open the safe. She hoped you would stand here today and mourn her. But you made your choice." "Just give it to me," Jason snapped, snatching the envelope from my hand. "You are so dramatic." He tore the flap open. He didn't care about the message on the front that read, "To my son." He just wanted what was inside. He pulled out a single folded document. It was legal-sized, thick, formal paper. Megan leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the page hungrily. But as they read, the hunger vanished. It was replaced by confusion, then shock, and finally a pure, unadulterated panic. This isn't a check," Jason stammered. He looked up at me, the rain dripping from his nose. "What is this?" "Read it," I said coldly. "Read the header." Jason swallowed hard. "Notice of immediate loan recall and foreclosure." He read, his voice shaking. Megan grabbed the paper from him. "What does that mean? Why is there a demand for $450,000? We own our house, we pay the mortgage to the bank, no." I corrected her. "You don't." I took a step closer, forcing them to back up against the wet gravestone. 2 years ago, when your business went under, Jason, and you were about to lose everything, you cried to your mother. You told her the bank was going to foreclose on your home. You told her you would be on the street. You begged her not to tell me because you knew I would lecture you about your gambling debts. Jason turned pale. How do you know about that?" "Because she told me," I said. "She told me everything. We didn't bail you out with cash, Jason. Beatrice went to the bank. She bought your mortgage. She used her own trust fund to pay off the bank so that the debt was transferred to her. She became your lender." I pointed a finger at the document shaking in Megan's hands. "She did it to protect you. She set the interest rate to 0. She suspended the payments so you could get back on your feet. But she added a clause that I insisted on as the trustee of her estate." Jason looked down at the paper again, reading the fine print he had ignored. The clause of filial respect I quoted from memory. The loan remains interest-free and payment suspended as long as the beneficiary maintains a relationship of good standing with the lender and her spouse. Upon the death of the primary lender, the surviving spouse retains full discretion. In the event of estrangement, disrespect, or abandonment, the full principal amount becomes due immediately. I looked at my son. You just declared me dead to you, Jason. You just threatened to kick me out of my own home. I think that qualifies as estrangement. But we don't have $450,000, Megan shrieked, her voice cracking. We just bought a new car. We have credit card bills. That sounds like a personal problem, I said, buttoning my coat. The document gives you 30 days. 30 days to pay the Beatrice Blackwood Trust in full. If you don't, the trust will foreclose on your house. And since I am the sole executor of the trust, I let the sentence hang in the wet air. You can't do this, Jason yelled, stepping toward me aggressively. That's my house. You're my father. No, I said, standing my ground. I am the man who is dead to you. Remember, and that house belongs to the trust. It belongs to the memory of the woman you just disrespected over her open grave. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. My instinct was to fix it, to negotiate, to tell them it was a warning. But I saw the image of Beatrice crying in her bed, worried that her son would consume everything she built. I had to be strong. Where are you going? Jason shouted after me. Dad. You can't leave us like this. I walked toward my old truck, parked at the cemetery gates. I didn't look back. I am going home, I called out. To my house, the one you want to sell. I suggest you start packing Jason. The eviction process is faster than you think. I got into my truck and started the engine. My hands were shaking uncontrollably on the steering wheel. I watched in the rearview mirror as Jason kicked a flower arrangement in frustration and Megan screamed at him in the rain. This was just the beginning. I knew my son. I knew he wouldn't just accept this. He was cornered, and a cornered animal bites. He would come after me. He would try to destroy me before the 30 days were up. He would use Leo. He would use lies. He would try to declare me incompetent. But he had forgotten who I was. I was the man who calculated stress loads for bridges that carried millions of tons. I knew how to handle pressure, and I knew exactly where the structural weak points were in his life. I drove out of the cemetery, the windshield wipers slapping a rhythm against the glass. I'm sorry it had to be this way, Ba, I whispered to the empty passenger seat. But I will save him. I will save him by destroying the monster he has become. Even if I have to tear everything down to the foundation to do it. As I turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jason. You think you're smart, old man. You just started a war. You'll never see Leo again. I gripped the phone. They were going to use the boy. I knew it. I did not reply. I simply deleted the message and drove on. The war had indeed started, but they were fighting with anger and greed. I was fighting with the meticulous planning of a dying mother's last wish, and I had a few more envelopes that they didn't know about. The first conflict had been fired. The hook was set, but the real storm was just gathering on the horizon. I drove home to an empty house, but my mind was already racing, calculating the next move, preparing for the escalation I knew was coming tonight. They wouldn't wait 30 days. They would come for me tonight, and I would be ready. The silence of the house was not peaceful. It was heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat in my leather armchair in the study, the only light coming from the embers of the fireplace and the glow of the security monitor on my desk. Beatrice used to hate this room. She said it smelled too much of old paper and tobacco. But tonight it was my command center. I was not mourning in the traditional sense. I was waiting. I knew my son. I knew Jason. He was not a man who processed shame quietly. He was a man who reacted to consequences with rage. The clock on the mantel ticked past 9. Right on cue, the motion sensors at the front gate triggered. On the grainy black and white screen, I saw them. Jason's luxury SUV squealed into the driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. He did not park. He abandoned the car at a crooked angle, leaving the driver's side door open. Megan was right behind him, stumbling slightly in her heels. They looked like predators who had been wounded and were looking for something to kill to make themselves feel powerful again. I did not get up to greet them. I watched as they stormed up the porch steps. The pounding on the front door shook the frame. It was violent, rhythmic, and entitled. "Open up, Conrad. I know you are in there." Jason's voice was muffled by the thick oak, but the venom was clear. "Open this door before I kick it in." I picked up my phone, but I did not dial yet. I wanted them to commit. I wanted there to be no ambiguity about what was happening tonight. I walked slowly to the foyer, my cane tapping against the hardwood floor, a sound that used to make Jason straighten his posture when he was a boy. Now it just seemed to infuriate him. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. I did not invite them in, but they did not wait for an invitation. Jason shoved the door wide, hitting my shoulder as he barged into the hallway. Megan followed, slamming the door behind her, shutting out the night and trapping the toxicity inside. "Get out," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are trespassing." Trespassing. Jason laughed, a sound that was bordering on manic. "This is my house, old man. My name is in the will. I grew up in these halls. You can't trespass in your own inheritance." He was waving the foreclosure notice I had given him at the cemetery. It was crumpled now, stained with rain and sweat. "You think this is funny?" he shouted, getting in my face. "You think you can blackmail me with Mom's trust fund? You are going to sign a release right now. You are going to sign a document stating that the loan is forgiven and that the title to this house is transferred to me immediately." Or what I asked, looking him in the eye. "Or we will make your life a living hell," Megan hissed, stepping out from behind her husband. She looked around the foyer, her eyes calculating the value of the antique mirror and the Persian rug. "We will declare you incompetent, Conrad. We will tell the court that grief has made you lose your mind. We will say you are spending the estate's money on delusions. We will have you locked away in a memory care unit so fast your head will spin." I looked at them and I felt a profound wave of exhaustion. It was not fear. It was the crushing weight of disappointment. These were the people Beatrice had worried about until her final breath. She had been right to worry. "You are threatening me in my own home," I stated simply. "I am giving you a choice," Jason spat. He grabbed a vase from the entry table, a delicate porcelain piece Beatrice had brought back from our trip to Kyoto 30 years ago. He held it over the floor. "Sign the paper, Dad, or I start breaking things. And I won't stop with the furniture. I will break you." That vase was worth more than his car, but he didn't know that. He only saw leverage. He only saw an object he could use to hurt me. "Put it down, Jason," I warned him. "Sign the paper." He screamed, and he let go. The vase shattered. The sound was like a gunshot in the enclosed space. Shards of blue and white porcelain skittered across the floor, stopping at the toes of my shoes. That was the line. Structural integrity had been compromised. The bridge had collapsed. I did not yell. I did not lunge at him. I simply lifted my phone, which I had been holding at my side, and pressed the call button. "Who are you calling?" Megan shrieked, trying to grab the phone. I stepped back, raising my cane to create a barrier between us. 911. "What is your emergency?" The operator's voice was tinny but clear in the sudden silence. "My name is Conrad Blackwood," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on my son. "I am at 4200 Highland Drive. I have intruders in my home. They have broken in and are destroying property. I am an elderly man and I feel threatened. Please send officers immediately." Jason stared at me, his mouth open in disbelief. You called the cops. On your own son. I lowered the phone but kept the line open. I told you at the funeral, Jason. I have no son. You made that clear when you buried your mother. Now you are just a man who broke into my house and shattered my wife's vase. You senile old bat, Megan screamed. She lunged at me, her nails aiming for my face. I sidestepped. I am 70, but I worked on construction sites for 40 years, dodging swinging steel beams and navigating scaffolding. I am not frail. She stumbled past me and tripped over the cane I deftly placed in her path. She fell onto the hardwood, landing hard on her hands and knees amidst the porcelain shards. Don't touch her, Jason roared, rushing to help her up. He turned on me, his fists clenched, his face purple with rage. I am going to kill you. I stood my ground. Do it, I said coldly. Do it while the 911 operator is listening. Do it so you can spend the rest of your life in a cell instead of just losing your house. He froze. The reality of the situation finally pierced through his tantrum. He heard the sirens in the distance. They were getting louder, wailing up the hill toward us. He looked at the broken vase. He looked at me. And for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Not regret. Fear of consequences. We have to go, Megan whimpered, clutching her scraped knee. Jason, we have to go. No, I said, blocking the door. You wanted to come in. Now you can wait for the escort. The next 5 minutes were the longest of my life. Jason paced the hallway, muttering curses, kicking the wall, leaving black scuff marks on the wainscoting. Megan sat on the stairs, crying not out of remorse, but out of self-pity. I stood by the door, silent, a sentinel guarding the ruins of my family. When the blue and red lights flashed through the transom window, Jason stopped pacing. He tried to compose himself, smoothing his hair, buttoning his jacket, trying to put the mask of the successful businessman back on. But it was too late. The sweat on his forehead and the wild look in his eyes gave him away. 2 officers knocked. I opened the door. Officer Miller, I said, recognizing the older of the 2. He had been a rookie when I was consulting on the city's bridge renovation project years ago. Mr. Blackwood, are you all right? Miller asked, stepping inside, his hand resting on his belt. He looked at the shattered vase and the couple cowering near the stairs. I am physically unharmed, I said, but these people forced their way in. They demanded money. They destroyed my property. I want them removed. Dad, tell them it is a misunderstanding. Jason tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. We were just grieving Mom. Emotions got high. Officer Miller looked at me. Is this your son, sir? I looked at Jason. I looked at the man who had checked his watch while his mother was being buried. I looked at the man who had just threatened to kill me. This is Jason Blackwood, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He is a relative, but he does not live here. He is not welcome here. And he has been served with a foreclosure notice today, which I believe is the motive for this attack. I want to press charges for trespassing and destruction of property. Jason's jaw dropped. You are pressing charges? Yes, I said. Officer Miller nodded. He turned to Jason. Sir, ma'am, I need you to step outside. Now. Jason hesitated. For a second I thought he might try to hit me again. But the second officer stepped forward and Jason deflated. He grabbed Megan's arm roughly and pulled her toward the door. As he passed me, he stopped. The police were on the porch giving us a moment of privacy they probably thought was for reconciliation. They were wrong. Jason leaned in close, his eyes burning with a cold hatred that matched my own. You think you won, he whispered so only I could hear. You think you are tough. But you forgot one thing, old man. I stared at him, saying nothing. You forgot Leo, he hissed. You want to play hardball. Fine. You will never see your grandson again. I will tell the school you are dangerous. I will get a restraining order. I will poison that kid's mind against you until he hates the sound of your name. You will die alone in this big, empty house, and Leo won't even come to your funeral." He pulled back, smiling a cruel, triumphant smile. That was his ace. He knew Leo was the only thing I had left to live for. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking for the first time that night. He walked out into the flashing lights, playing the victim, holding his hands up for the officers. I closed the door and locked it. I slid the deadbolt home. I engaged the security system. Then, and only then, did I allow myself to sink to the floor. I picked up a shard of the blue porcelain. I held it in my palm until the sharp edge cut into my skin. The physical pain was grounding. It kept me from screaming. He was going to use the boy. He was going to weaponize an 8-year-old child to protect his greed. Beatrice had warned me he might go low, but I never imagined he would go this low. I stood up. I went to the kitchen and washed the small cut on my hand. The water ran red for a moment, then clear. If he wanted to use the law to keep me from Leo, then I would use the law to take everything else. He had threatened the one innocent thing in this entire mess. I dried my hands. I walked into my study and opened the wall safe behind the painting of the bridge I had built in 1995. I pulled out a black ledger. It contained the details of the family trust, the clauses Beatrice had agonized over, and the nuclear options we had hoped never to use. I turned the pages until I found the section on guardianship and child welfare. I picked up the phone again. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. "Solomon," I said, when my lawyer answered. "Conrad, it is midnight. What is wrong?" "He came to the house," I said. "He threatened me, and he threatened to cut me off from Leo." There was a silence on the other end. Then the sound of a rustling sheet and a lamp clicking on. "I see," Solomon said, his voice shifting from sleepy friend to shark attorney. "That was a mistake. I want to activate the Omega Protocol," I said. Conrad, Solomon warned. "Once we start that, there is no going back. It triggers the fraud investigation. It freezes everything. It declares war not just on his finances, but on his character. He threatened the boy Solomon. He is going to use my grandson as a shield. I need to take him out. I need to strip him bare before he can hurt that child. Do it." I hung up. The invasion was over. The battle for the house was over. The war for the future of my grandson had just begun. And Jason had no idea that by threatening to keep me away, he had just invited a hurricane into his life. The morning sun did not break through the gray blanket of clouds hanging over Seattle. It was a Tuesday, usually my favorite day of the week, because it was my turn to pick up Leo from St. Jude's Elementary. For 5 years, ever since he started kindergarten, I had been the one waiting at the gate. It was our ritual. We would go for ice cream, or if the weather was bad, we would go to the library and look at books about trains and skyscrapers. It was the 1 hour of the week where I felt purely like a grandfather, and not like a bank account or a burden. I parked my truck in the usual spot 3 cars down from the crosswalk. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I had not slept since the police left my house. The image of the shattered vase and the hatred in Jason's eyes had played on a loop in my mind all night. But I told myself that today would be different. Today was about Leo. Jason and Megan could hate me, they could threaten me, but surely they would not disrupt the boys' routine. Surely they knew that Leo needed stability. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The bags under my eyes were heavy, and the stubble on my chin was gray and rough. I tried to smooth my hair, tried to look like the respectable retired engineer I was, and not the man who had almost brawled with his son 12 hours ago. I stepped out into the drizzle and walked toward the school entrance. The bell rang a shrill sound that usually signaled joy. Children began to pour out of the double doors, a sea of backpacks and bright raincoats. I scanned the crowd looking for the bright yellow jacket Leo insisted on wearing, even when it wasn't raining. "Mr. Blackwood." The voice was sharp, professional, and blocked my path. I looked down. It was Mrs. Gable, the school administrator. She was a woman I had known for years, a woman I had made small talk with about gardening and local politics. Usually she greeted me with a smile. Today her lips were pressed into a thin, hard line, and her arms were crossed over her chest. "Hello, Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to step around her. "I am just here for Leo. I cannot let you do that." "Mr. Blackwood," she said, stepping in front of me again, "you need to come to the principal's office. Now." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Why, I asked, "Is Leo sick? Is he in trouble?" "No," she said, her eyes darting around the crowd of parents, some of whom were starting to watch us. "But we have received new instructions regarding his pickup. Please, do not make a scene." Make a scene. The phrase stung. I followed her into the building, the smell of floor wax and wet wool filling my nose. We walked past the trophy case, past the finger-painted murals, into the glass-walled office of Principal Henderson. He was sitting at his desk looking uncomfortable. Standing next to him wearing a trench coat and a look of practiced concern was Megan. My breath hitched. She was supposed to be at work, or at the lawyer's office trying to figure out how to pay me. She was not supposed to be here. "Megan," I said, my voice rough. "What are you doing?" She turned to look at me, and her expression was a masterpiece of fabrication. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she had been crying, and she looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear that made my skin crawl. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "Please, don't make this harder than it has to be." "Mr. Blackwood, have a seat," Principal Henderson said, gesturing to a chair. I remained standing. "I want to know where my grandson is." Megan sighed a long, shuddering breath. "See," she said to the principal, "he is agitated. He gets like this when he is confused." "I am not confused," I snapped, my voice rising. "I am here to pick up my grandson, as I have done every Tuesday for 5 years." "Mr. Blackwood," Principal Henderson said, picking up a piece of paper from his desk. "Mrs. Blackwood has provided us with some concerning documentation. Given the events of last night and the medical context she has shared, we have to prioritize the safety of the student." Medical context. I looked at Megan. "What lies have you told them?" Megan reached into her bag and pulled out a file. It wasn't an official court order, not yet. It was a notarized affidavit signed by a doctor I had never met, a Dr. Alistair Thorne. I could see the letterhead from where I stood. "Dad," Megan said, speaking to me as if I were a toddler. "Jason and I spoke to the specialist. We told him about the aggression, about the paranoia, about how you called the police on us because you forgot who we were." "I forgot who you were." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "I called the police because you broke into my home and destroyed my property." "See," Megan whispered to the principal, pointing at me. "The persecution complex. He rewrites reality to make himself the victim. It is classic early-stage dementia with aggressive tendencies. We are filing for emergency guardianship, but until the court date, we cannot risk Leo being alone with him. He might forget he has him. Or worse." She let the sentence trail off, implying horrors that made the principal pale. "This is a lie," I said, gripping the back of the chair to keep my hands from shaking. "This woman is lying to you. She is trying to steal my estate. This is about money." "Of course it is, Dad," Megan said soothingly. "It is always about money with you lately. That is part of the paranoia. You think everyone is robbing you." Principal Henderson stood up. "Mr. Blackwood, until this legal dispute is settled, I have to ban you from school grounds. We cannot have altercations here. Leo will be going home with his mother today." I felt like I was drowning. They had turned the truth inside out. They had taken my defense of my home and twisted it into evidence of insanity. It was tactical, it was brilliant, and it was evil. At that moment, the door to the office opened. A teacher's aide looked in, breathless. "I am sorry, Mr. Henderson, but Leo saw his grandfather's truck in the lot. He is very upset." Leo pushed past the aide before she could finish. He was small for his age, with messy brown hair and eyes that were usually full of mischief. Today, they were wide with panic. "Grandpa," he yelled, running into the room. He didn't run to his mother. He ran to me. He slammed into my legs, wrapping his small arms around my waist, burying his face in my coat. "You came," he sobbed. "Mom said you went away. She said you were sick, and you went to a hospital." I put my hand on his head, feeling the dampness of his hair. The rush of love I felt was so intense it hurt. He was the only truth in this room. "I am here, Leo," I said, glaring at Megan. "I am not sick, and I am not going anywhere." Megan moved fast. She didn't look like a grieving daughter-in-law anymore. She looked like a raptor. She grabbed Leo by the shoulder and yanked him away from me. "Leo, get away from him!" she hissed. "No," Leo screamed, fighting her grip. "I want Grandpa. You said he was crazy. He isn't crazy." "It is okay, sweetie," Megan said, her voice tight, trying to maintain the facade for the principal. "Grandpa is having an episode. We have to go." She dragged him backward. He was kicking his legs, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. He reached out his hand toward me, his fingers splayed. "Grandpa, help! Don't let them take me." My instinct was to lunge. My instinct was to grab her wrist and twist it until she let him go. I took a step forward, my cane raised instinctively. "Mr. Blackwood," Principal Henderson shouted, reaching for his phone. "Do not advance, I will call security." I froze. If I touched her, if I even yelled too loudly, I would prove them right. I would be the violent, unstable old man they were painting me to be. I would end up in a cell, and Leo would be lost to me forever. I had to be smarter. I had to play the long game. But God, it felt like ripping my own heart out. "Leo, listen to me," I said, my voice cracking. I looked him in the eye, trying to pour all my sanity, all my love into that connection. "I am going to fix this. Do you hear me? I am going to fix it. Be a brave boy." Megan scooped him up, though he was too big for it, and clamped her hand over his mouth to stifle his sobs. She looked at me over his shoulder. Her eyes were triumphant. "Say goodbye, Conrad," she mouthed silently. Then she turned and carried him out the side door. I heard his muffled screams fading down the hallway. I stood there in the office, breathing hard, my chest heaving. The principal was watching me warily, his hand hovering over the desk phone. "You should leave, Mr. Blackwood," he said softly, "before I have to make that call." I straightened my coat. I picked up my cane. I looked at the man who had just helped kidnap my grandson. "You have made a mistake, Henderson," I said quietly. "You just let a wolf walk out of here with a lamb because she was wearing a nice coat. I hope you can sleep tonight." I walked out of the school. The rain had stopped, leaving the world gray and flat. I walked to my truck, my legs feeling numb. I got in and locked the doors. The silence inside the cab was deafening. I could still hear Leo screaming. I put my head on the steering wheel and let out a single guttural roar of rage. It was a sound I didn't know I could make. It was the sound of a patriarch whose lineage was being threatened. They had done it. They had crossed the final line. They had used the boy. They had traumatized him, lied to him, and used him as a pawn to hurt me. I sat up and wiped my face. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The grief was gone. In its place was a cold, mathematical precision. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a burner phone I had bought 3 years ago just in case. I dialed Solomon's private number. "It is done," I said when he answered. "Did they stop you?" Solomon asked. "She came to the school," and I said, my voice devoid of inflection. "She had a fake medical affidavit. She told the boy I was insane. She dragged him away screaming. There was a pause on the line. Solomon knew what this meant. He knew that we were no longer talking about a civil dispute or a foreclosure. We were talking about total war. "Activate the Omega Protocol," I said. Conrad Solomon started, his voice heavy with warning. "The Omega Protocol isn't just about the money. It will trigger the audit of Jason's shell companies. It will expose the offshore gambling debts Beatrice paid off. It will release the private investigators' files on Megan's past. It will destroy them publicly. They will go to prison. Leo will be placed in foster care until the custody hearing is resolved." "I know," I said, watching a raindrop trace a path down the window. "If we do this," Solomon continued, "there is no turning back. You will be the man who sent his son to jail. You will be the man who burned down the family tree." "The family tree is rotten, Solomon," I said. "It is poisoned. If I don't cut it down, it will kill the only healthy branch left. It will kill Leo. They will turn him into them. I cannot allow that." I took a breath. "Execute it. Freeze their assets. Send the files to the district attorney. And Solomon, yes. Send the evidence of the forged medical affidavit to the medical board. I want that doctor's license. I want anyone who helped them to bleed." "Understood," Solomon said. "I will file the motions within the hour. By tonight, their credit cards will stop working. By tomorrow morning, the police will be knocking on their door with a warrant for fraud and elder abuse." "Good," I said. I hung up the phone and threw it onto the passenger seat. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, a powerful mechanical sound. I was not going home to cry. I was going to the bank. I was going to the courthouse. I was going to systematically dismantle every safety net my son and his wife had ever known. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was a senile old man who could be pushed aside. They had forgotten that before I was a grandfather, I was a man who moved mountains to build paths for others. And now, I was going to move a mountain to drop it right on top of them. I pulled out of the parking lot, passing the playground where Leo used to play. "Hold on, Leo," I whispered. "Grandpa is coming, and I am bringing the thunder." The attack on my grandson was their victory for exactly 1 hour. It would be the cause of their destruction for the rest of their lives. The escalation was over. Now it was time for the trap to snap shut. The Omega Protocol was live, and they wouldn't even see it coming until the ground opened up beneath their feet. I drove straight from the school to the First National Bank downtown. The rain had picked up again, drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof of my truck, matching the pounding in my temples. I needed to secure the assets. I needed to ensure that the Omega Protocol was not just a threat, but a financial reality. Arthur Sterling, the branch manager, and a man I had trusted for 30 years, met me at the door of his office. He did not offer me coffee. He did not ask about the funeral. His face was pale, the kind of pallor that comes from witnessing a crime. "Conrad," he said, closing the blinds of his glass-walled office. "I was about to call you. We have a situation." I sat down, resting my cane against the mahogany desk. I assumed he was talking about the foreclosure notice or perhaps Jason trying to access the main accounts. I was prepared for greed. I was not prepared for what Arthur slid across the desk. It was an access log for Safety Deposit Box 404, Beatrice's private box, the one she kept her grandmother's emeralds in, the one she kept the original deeds to our properties in. "Look at the date," Arthur said, his voice low. I put on my reading glasses. The date was 3 days before Beatrice passed away. She was in a coma at that point, hooked up to machines in the hospice wing of St. Mary's. She could not lift a spoon, let alone walk into a bank vault. "And look at the signature," Arthur whispered. I looked. It was a shaky scrawl. It looked like Beatrice's signature, if you squinted, if you didn't know the specific loop she put on her B, the way she crossed her T's with a flourish. But I knew. I knew her hand better than my own. This was a forgery. It was a good one, practiced, calculated, but it was a forgery. Who allowed this? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. The weekend teller, Arthur said, wiping sweat from his forehead. She is new. She didn't know Beatrice was in the hospital. The man had a power of attorney document. We checked it later. It was a fake, Conrad. A high-quality fake, but a fake. Show me the tape, I said. Arthur turned his monitor. He clicked a file. The black and white footage flickered to life. I saw the back of a man in a hooded raincoat standing at the counter. He was nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot, looking over his shoulder at the security guard. He pushed the papers across the counter. He tapped his fingers on the marble. Then he turned slightly. The camera caught his profile, the weak chin, the nervous tick of biting his lower lip. It was Jason. I watched my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, walk into the vault. I watched him come out 5 minutes later, a bulge in his jacket pocket that hadn't been there before. He stole the emeralds, I said, feeling a wave of nausea. He stole his mother's jewelry while she was dying. Arthur hesitated. He looked down at his hands. Conrad, the box wasn't just jewelry. Beatrice came in 2 months ago. She was very weak. She needed a wheelchair. She put a ledger in there. She told me that if anything happened to her, you needed to see it. But Jason took it, I finished. No, Arthur said. He missed it. He took the velvet pouch with the stones, but he didn't check under the lining. We found it this morning when we audited the box after realizing the signature was flagged. Arthur reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small black notebook. It was battered, the spine broken. It smelled faintly of Beatrice's lavender perfume. I opened it. My hands were trembling, but not from age, from rage. The entries were in Beatrice's handwriting, but it was erratic, pressed hard into the paper, as if she were writing in pain. January 4th. Jason called. He needs 50,000. The sharks are threatening to break his legs. I wired it. Don't tell Conrad. He will have a heart attack. February 12th. He came to the house while Conrad was at the site. He was screaming. He grabbed my arm. He said he needed more. I gave him the emergency cash. My chest hurts. March 30th. The doctor says my blood pressure is critical. I can't sleep. Jason says if I don't sign the house over, he will go to jail. I can't let him go to jail. I am so tired. I just want to sleep. I read the last entry. It was dated 2 days before her collapse. He says he hates me. He says I am holding out on him. He wished I would just die so he could get the trust. I think he means it. My heart feels like it is breaking. I closed the book. The silence in the office was absolute. The doctors said it was natural causes. They said her heart just gave out. They said the cancer weakened her and her heart couldn't take the strain. They were wrong. It wasn't the cancer. Jason killed her. He didn't use a gun. He didn't use poison. He used stress. He used fear. He bullied a dying woman, his own mother, until her heart literally stopped beating because she was too terrified of what would happen to him if she lived. He drained her life force just as he drained her bank account. I looked up at Arthur. The grief I had felt at the cemetery was gone. The sadness I had felt at the school was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. This was not a son. This was a parasite. And you do not negotiate with a parasite. You eradicate it. Did he take anything else? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. He tried to access the main trust accounts, Arthur said. But the Omega protocol you triggered an hour ago locked him out. He was here 20 minutes ago, Conrad. He was screaming at the tellers. He said the system was broken. He said he was the heir. We had to call security to escort him out. Good, I said. I stood up. I tucked the black notebook into my inside pocket right next to my heart. This book was my warrant. It was my justification for everything I was about to do. Arthur, I said, I want you to print a full audit of every withdrawal Beatrice made in the last year. Every wire transfer. Every cash withdrawal. I want the paper trail of how he bled her dry. I will have it ready in an hour, Arthur promised. And one more thing, I added, leaning on my cane. If he comes back. If he calls. You tell him nothing. You tell him there is a system error. You tell him the accounts are under review. You give him hope. Hope, Arthur asked, confused. Why? Because I want to crush it, I said. I walked out of the bank and into the rain. The city looked different now. It wasn't just gray buildings and wet streets. It was a battlefield. Jason thought this was about a house. He thought this was about an inheritance. He had no idea. He had committed the ultimate sin. He had hastened the death of the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally. I sat in my truck and watched the rain streak the windshield. I thought about the dinner table in my house, the empty chair where Beatrice used to sit. He wanted the house. He wanted the money. He wanted to win. I picked up my burner phone. I dialed Jason's number. It rang once, twice. What Jason answered, his voice, breathless panic edging into his tone. He was probably standing outside an ATM staring at a declined receipt. Jason, I said, making my voice sound old, making it sound broken, tired, defeated. What do you want, old man? Jason snapped. I am busy. I saw Leo today, I stammered, forcing a tremor into my words. At the school. It broke me, Jason. I can't do this. I can't fight you. I am just an old man who misses his wife. There was a silence on the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, the predator sensing weakness. So Jason asked, his voice losing some of its edge, replaced by suspicion. So you win, I lied. I will sign the papers. I will forgive the debt. I will give you the house. Just let me see Leo. Let me live in the basement apartment. I just want to be near family. I held my breath. This was the gamble. If he was smart, he would know it was a trap. But he wasn't smart. He was greedy. And he was desperate. You serious? Jason asked. You will sign over the deed. Tonight. Yes, I said. Come to the house, but bring Megan. Bring your lawyer if you want. Let's have dinner. Let's be a family again. Like your mother wanted. I will be there at 7, Jason said. And don't try anything funny, Conrad. Or I swear I will have you committed tonight. He hung up. I lowered the phone. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were hard. Cold. Come to dinner, Jason, I whispered. Come and eat at the table of the woman you killed. I started the engine. I had work to do. I had to buy groceries. I had to set the table. And I had to prepare the ink. The special ink I had used on engineering blueprints in the 70s. The ink that faded to nothing after 24 hours. He wanted me to sign my life away. I would sign. I would give him everything he wanted. And then when he thought he was king, I would pull the floor out from under him and watch him fall into the abyss he had dug for himself. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Tonight we would feast. The rain had not let up since I left the bank, but inside my house the air was dry and still. It felt like a stage set waiting for the actors to arrive. I placed the black notebook, the one that contained the evidence of my wife's slow murder, on the mantelpiece right next to the urn that held her ashes. It was fitting. She would be watching. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. I needed to look defeated. I let my shoulders slump. I practiced a tremor in my hands. I stared at my own reflection until the fire in my eyes dimmed down to the dull wash of a beaten dog. I was ready. I picked up the landline in the kitchen. The corded phone felt heavy, a relic of a time when we were a happy family. I dialed Jason's number. It rang 4 times. He was making me wait. He was establishing dominance. "What do you want now, Conrad?" Jason answered, his voice clipped and impatient. "I am in a meeting with my lawyer." I let a long, shaky breath rattle into the receiver. "Jason," I said, my voice cracking perfectly on the second syllable. "I cannot do this. I am tired, son. I am so tired." There was a pause. The background noise on his end quieted. "What are you saying, Dad?" "I am saying you win," I whispered. "I saw Leo today. I saw the fear in his eyes when they took him away. I cannot lose him. I cannot spend my last years in court fighting my own flesh and blood. Beatrice would not have wanted this." "You are damn right she wouldn't have," Jason snapped, but I heard the shift in his tone. The wariness was replaced by a gloating satisfaction. "So what are you proposing?" "Come to dinner," I said. "Tonight. Bring the papers. Bring the transfer deed for the house. I will sign it. I will sign everything. I just want to stay in the guest suite in the basement. I just want to be able to see my grandson grow up. Please, Jason, don't cast me out." I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the urge to vomit at my own words. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. "You will sign the deed?" Jason asked, ensuring he heard me correctly. "And you will release the trust claim on the mortgage?" "Yes," I said. "Everything. Just promise me I can see Leo." "I will think about it," Jason said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. "If you sign without making a scene, maybe we can work out a visitation schedule. Supervised, of course." "Thank you," I said, forcing a sob. "Thank you, son. 7 o'clock. I will make your mother's lasagna." "Make sure you have a pen," Jason said and hung up. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment listening to the hum of the refrigerator. He had bought it. He was so blinded by his own greed and his belief in my weakness that he didn't even question the sudden surrender. He thought he had broken me at the school. He thought I was a senile old man terrified of dying alone. He had no idea I was the shark circling the water. I went to my study. It was time to prepare the kill box. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my drafting desk. Inside was a wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. It was a gift from Beatrice on our 25th anniversary. Inside sat a Mont Blanc fountain pen, heavy and black with gold trim. I had used this pen to sign the contracts for the Golden Gate retrofit. I had used it to sign my marriage license. Now I would use it to sign my son's destruction. I took the ink cartridge out. It was dried up, useless. I went to the small laboratory setup I kept in the corner of the room, a remnant of my days testing chemical compounds for concrete durability. I pulled out a small vial of clear blue liquid. It was a formula I had mixed years ago, a novelty I used to amuse Leo with magic tricks. Thymolphthalein mixed with a high pH solution. It looked like bold royal blue ink when wet. But upon contact with the carbon dioxide in the air, the pH would drop. Within 24 hours, the blue would fade to clear. Within 48 hours, the paper would be as blank as the day it was made. I carefully injected the solution into the pen's reservoir. I tested it on a scrap of paper. I signed my name. Conrad Blackwood. The signature was bold, authoritative, and blue. I watched it for a minute. It stayed dark. Good. It would last long enough for them to leave the house celebrating. By the time they took it to the county clerk tomorrow morning, it would be a ghost. I placed the pen in the center of the desk. Next came the documentation. I needed them to admit it. I needed a recording of them acknowledging the fraud, acknowledging the forgery, acknowledging that they were forcing me to sign under duress. The law in our state was clear: one-party consent for recordings was legal, but I wanted this to be undeniable. I walked to the dining room. The large oak table was set for 3. I placed a floral arrangement in the center, a dense cluster of dried hydrangeas and eucalyptus. Hidden deep within the foliage, I nestled a high-fidelity digital recorder. It was small black and had a battery life of 12 hours. I pressed record. A tiny red light blinked once, then vanished. I tested the range, walking to the front door and speaking in a normal voice. I walked back and checked the levels. Crystal clear. I went to the kitchen. I began to cook. I browned the beef, I chopped the onions, I simmered the tomato sauce. The house began to smell of garlic and oregano, the scent of 1,000 family dinners. It was psychological warfare. I wanted them to walk in and smell their childhood. I wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted their guard to drop. While the lasagna baked, I made one final call. I did not use the landline. I used the burner phone again. "Solomon," I said. "Is it done?" Solomon asked. "The stage is set," I said. "They are coming at 7 to get the signature. Do not sign anything, Conrad, unless you are absolutely sure about that ink," Solomon warned. "If that ink holds, you are homeless. I mixed it myself." "Solomon," I said, "it will fade. But just in case, I have the secondary safeguard. The Omega Protocol," Solomon said. "Exactly," I said. "I am triggering the recording now. They will be here in an hour. As soon as they leave with the paper, I will text you. That is the signal. You file the emergency injunction for elder abuse and fraud first thing in the morning. You hit them with the foreclosure. And you send the police to the notary's office where they will try to file the deed." "Got it," Solomon said. "Be careful, Conrad. If they realize what you are doing—" "They won't," I said. "They see what they want to see. They see a victim." I hung up. I took the lasagna out of the oven. The cheese was bubbling and golden. It looked delicious. It looked like love. I went to the hallway mirror. I adjusted my cardigan. I looked at the man staring back. He looked frail. He looked worried. He looked exactly like the father Jason wanted to exploit. I walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. The rain had turned into a mist that clung to the streetlights. A car turned onto the street. It was Jason's Range Rover. He was early. He was eager. My heart rate slowed. My breathing steadied. I was back on the job site. I was back in the control room. The variables were calculated. The stress points were identified. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I did not open it. I waited for the knock. I wanted them to have to ask for entry one last time. The knock came. Sharp, authoritative. 3 raps. I opened the door. Jason stood there holding a leather portfolio. He was wearing a smug grin that made him look like a shark that had just smelled blood. Megan was beside him holding a bottle of cheap wine. She looked bored, as if she were doing me a favor by being here to rob me. "Hi, Dad," Jason said, stepping past me without waiting. "Smells good. I hope you didn't burn it." "Come in," I said, my voice trembling just the right amount. "Come in, son. Thank you for coming." I closed the door behind them. The lock clicked. The trap was armed. The recording was running. And the pen was waiting on the desk, loaded with invisible ink and a lifetime of consequences. "Let's get this over with," Megan said, walking straight to the dining room. "I have a yoga class at 9. I followed them, my cane tapping a slow rhythmic beat on the floor. I watched them sit at the table where they had celebrated Christmases and birthdays. I watched them pour the wine. I watched them toast to their victory. They had no idea that they were drinking to their own demise. "Here's the deal, Dad," Jason said, slapping the portfolio onto the table right next to the hidden microphone. "We eat. You sign. We leave. And tomorrow I own this house." I sat down opposite him. I looked at his face. I looked for any sign of hesitation, any sign of a soul. There was nothing. "Okay," I said, reaching for the lasagna cutter. "Let's eat." The meal had begun, and it would be the most expensive dinner they ever ate. The lasagna sat heavy in my stomach, like a stone weight, but I forced myself to take another bite. Across the table, Jason was eating with the voracious appetite of a man who believed he had just conquered a kingdom. He shoveled the food into his mouth, the red sauce staining the corners of his lips, looking for all the world like a child who had gotten away with stealing from the cookie jar. Beside him, Megan pushed the pasta around her plate with her fork, her nose wrinkled in that perpetual expression of disdain she reserved for anything that did not come with a high price tag or a designer label. The dining room was dim lit only by the chandelier Beatrice had loved so much. The crystals cast fractured rainbows on the walls, dancing over the faces of the two people who were currently plotting my demise while eating my food. The hidden recorder nestled in the floral centerpiece was a silent black eye, watching unblinking. I had to make them talk. I had to guide them into the trap without them feeling the wire trip against their ankles. "This isn't bad, Dad," Jason said, talking with his mouth full. "A little heavy on the garlic maybe, but I guess beggars can't be choosers, right?" I lowered my fork, my hand trembling with a practiced weakness. "I tried to follow your mother's recipe," I said, my voice soft. "She always made it best." Megan let out a sharp, cruel laugh. She dropped her fork onto the china with a loud clatter. "Oh God, Conrad, stop with the saintly Beatrice act. She was a mediocre cook at best. And this house smells like a garlic factory. The first thing I am going to do is hire a professional cleaning crew to scrub this old person's smell out of the drapes." I gripped the edge of the table under the tablecloth, digging my fingernails into the wood to keep from lashing out. "That is fine, Megan," I said, keeping my eyes downcast. "You can decorate however you like. I just want to be comfortable in the basement suite." Megan looked at Jason and rolled her eyes. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. She began to wander around the room, touching things, picking them up and setting them down with careless force. She stopped at the display cabinet where Beatrice kept her collection of porcelain hummingbirds. "These are hideous," Megan said, tapping the glass. "Are they worth anything?" "Beatrice loved them," I said. Megan scoffed. "That means they are worthless." She moved on, walking toward the hallway that led to the library. Beatrice's sanctuary. Her desk was in there, still covered in her papers, her reading glasses sitting exactly where she had left them. "I am going to knock that wall down," Megan announced, pointing toward the library door. "That room is wasted space. It is dark and depressing. It will make a perfect home gym. I can put the treadmill right where that dusty old desk is." My heart hammered against my ribs. That desk was where Beatrice had written her letters to Jason, begging him to get help for his gambling. That desk was sacred ground. "Please, Megan," I said, forcing a plead into my tone. "Leave the desk. It is all I have left of her." Megan turned to face me, her face twisted in a sneer. "She is dead, Conrad. Objects are just objects. You are holding on to trash because you are too weak to move on. That is why we have to take over. You are incapable of making rational decisions about this property." Jason wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and poured himself another glass of wine. He was relaxed now, the alcohol and the food loosening his tongue. He leaned back in his chair, looking at me with a pity that was far more insulting than his wife's hatred. "She is right, Dad," Jason said. "Look at you. You are a mess. You are signing this house over because deep down, you know you can't handle it. You know you need us to take control." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had held in my arms when he was minutes old. I needed him to say it. I needed him to admit the crime. "I suppose you are right," I said, letting my shoulders slump further. "I am confused lately. Maybe that doctor was right. Maybe I am losing my mind." Jason chuckled darkly. "Dr. Thorne. Yeah, he is a sharp guy. He saw right through you. But I never met him," I said, innocently casting the lure. "How could he know I was sick if he never examined me?" Jason waved his hand dismissively, the wine sloshing in his glass. "It doesn't matter, Dad. We told him what he needed to know. We told him about the aggression, the memory loss. He didn't need to see you to know you are a liability. We paid him enough to ensure he understood the urgency of the situation. Megan walked back to the table leaning over me, her perfume overpowering the smell of the food. It cost us $5,000 to get that affidavit signed, Conrad. $5,000 because you were being stubborn. If you had just died quietly like you were supposed to, we wouldn't have had to spend that money. I looked up at her, blinking rapidly, as if holding back tears. You paid a doctor to say I was crazy. We did what was necessary, Megan hissed, just like we did what was necessary with the bank. The bank, I asked, turning to Jason. What do you mean? Jason laughed again, a sound that was ugly and distorted. Mom's safety deposit box, Ed. You really think she signed that access log? She couldn't even hold a pen. I stared at him, letting my jaw drop in feigned shock. You forged her signature. I practiced for weeks, Jason bragged, puffing out his chest. I sat at the kitchen table tracing her signature from old birthday cards until I could do it with my eyes closed. The teller didn't even blink. I walked right in there and took what was ours. Those emeralds paid off the shark's dad. I saved this family while you were sitting by her bedside, holding her hand and crying. You stole from your dying mother, I whispered. I took my inheritance early, Jason corrected, slamming his hand onto the table. And now I am taking the rest. Where are the papers? I reached down to the floor and picked up the leather portfolio he had brought in. My hands were shaking, and this time I didn't have to pretend. The sheer malice radiating from them was physically sickening. I opened the portfolio. Inside was the deed transfer. It was a standard quitclaim deed transferring the property, located at 4200 Highland Drive, from Conrad Blackwood to Jason and Megan Blackwood for the sum of $1. Here I said, pulling the paper out and smoothing it onto the tablecloth. Jason reached into his pocket for a pen, but I stopped him. Use this one, I said. I pulled the Mont Blanc fountain pen from my pocket, the one filled with the chemical solution, the one that would write in disappearing ink. It was your mother's favorite pen. I lied, my voice thick with emotion. I want to sign it with something that meant something to her. It feels right. Jason rolled his eyes, but he took the pen. He didn't care about the sentiment. He just wanted the signature. Whatever gets this done, he muttered. He handed the pen to me. I uncapped it. The gold nib glinted in the chandelier light. I looked at the paper. I looked at the line marked grantor. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted them to sweat one last time. And the basement, I asked, looking up at Jason. You promise I can stay? You promise I can see Leo? Jason sighed, an exaggerated sound of annoyance. Yes, Dad. We will fix up the basement. You can see Leo on weekends. Just sign the damn paper. I lowered the pen to the paper. The nib touched the fiber. The blue ink flowed smooth and dark. Conrad Blackwood. I wrote my name with a flourish, underlining it twice, just as I always did on official documents. The signature sat there bold and legally binding. For now. I recapped the pen and pushed the document toward Jason. He snatched it up, staring at the signature as if it were the Holy Grail. He grinned, a wide, predatory grin that showed all his teeth. Finally, he breathed. He looked at Megan. It is done. We own it. Megan clapped her hands together, a sharp, joyous sound. Oh, thank God, I can finally get rid of this awful furniture. Jason picked up the document, blowing on the wet ink. He folded it carefully and placed it back into his leather portfolio. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. The transformation was instant. The fake concern, the promises of the basement, the facade of family, it all dropped away like a heavy coat. Well, Jason said, looking down at me, his eyes cold and dead. Thanks for the lasagna, Dad. You should probably start packing. I looked at him confused. Packing? But you said, the basement. Jason laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. The basement. You think we are going to let you live in our basement? You called the cops on us, Conrad. You tried to humiliate us. We don't want you under our roof. But you promised, I stammered, standing up using the table for support. You said I could see Leo. I lied. Jason said simply. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. People lie, Dad. You should know that. There is no basement suite. There is no visitation schedule. We made a reservation for you at Shady Pines, the state facility. It is not great, but it is what you can afford now that you have signed over your biggest asset. Megan stepped up beside him, linking her arm through his. And don't try to fight it, she added, her voice dripping with venom. We have the affidavit from Dr. Thorne. We have your signature on this deed, giving us the house voluntarily. If you try to cause trouble, we will just show the judge that you are confused and aggressive and that we are doing our best to care for you. You can't do this, I whispered, sinking back into my chair. This is my home. Not anymore, Jason said, tapping the portfolio. Now it is my home, and I am evicting you. You have 24 hours to get your junk out. Whatever is left on Wednesday morning goes in the dumpster. He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps loud and confident on the hardwood. Megan followed him, casting one last look of triumph over her shoulder. Don't worry about the emeralds, Megan said. I sold them to a private buyer. They paid for the lawyer who drafted that deed. Isn't that poetic? Beatrice paid for her own house to be taken away. They walked out of the dining room. I heard the front door open. I heard Jason laughing as they walked down the porch steps. I heard the engine of his Range Rover roar to life. I sat there in the silence of the dining room, staring at the empty chairs and the half-eaten lasagna. The house felt violated. Their words hung in the air like a toxic mist. They had confessed to everything. They had admitted to the forgery, the bribery, the theft, and the lies. They had admitted that they manipulated me into signing. And they had done it all within 3 feet of the hydrangea centerpiece. I reached into the flowers and pulled out the small black recorder. The red light was still blinking steady and calm. I pressed the stop button. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. The act was over. The frail old man was gone. I walked to the window and watched their taillights disappear down the driveway. They were driving away to celebrate. They were probably going to open a bottle of expensive champagne and toast to their brilliance. They thought they had just secured $1 million asset. They didn't know that in 24 hours, the paper in that portfolio would be blank. They didn't know that by the time they walked into the county clerk's office to file the deed, the signature would be a ghost, a memory of a crime that never legally happened. But the recording was permanent. I picked up my phone. I dialed Solomon. Did they sign? Solomon asked immediately. I signed, I corrected him, with the special pen and the recording. I have it, I said, my voice hard as iron. I have everything, Solomon. They admitted to forging Beatrice's signature to steal the emeralds. They admitted to paying Dr. Thorne $5,000 for a fake diagnosis. They admitted they lied about the basement to trick me into signing. It is all there. Every word. Good God, Solomon breathed. They really are monsters. Yes, I said. And now we are going to slay them. What is the next move, Conrad? I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. Execute the Omega Protocol, I said. File the police report for the theft of the jewelry. Send the recording to the district attorney. And Solomon. Yes. Call the bank. Tell them to foreclose on the mortgage debt Jason owes the trust. Tell them to seize his assets tomorrow morning. I want him to wake up owning nothing. It will be done, Solomon said. Get some sleep, Conrad. The war is over. No, I said, looking at the urn on the mantelpiece. The war is over when I have Leo back, and when my son is in handcuffs. I hung up the phone. I walked to the kitchen and began to clear the table. I scraped the leftover lasagna into the trash. I washed the plates. I dried the wine glasses. I scrubbed the table until it shone. I was cleaning the crime scene. But I wasn't erasing the evidence. I was preparing the house for its true owner. Tomorrow, the ink would fade. Tomorrow, the police would come. Tomorrow, my son would learn that you cannot build a life on a foundation of lies, especially when the architect of that foundation is the father you betrayed. I went to bed, but I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, counting the hours, waiting for the sun to rise on the day of reckoning. The ink was fading already, molecule by molecule, and with it, Jason's future was evaporating into thin air. The door clicked shut, and the sound was like the final period at the end of a long and tragic sentence. I locked the deadbolt. Then I slid the heavy brass chain into place. I walked to the window and watched the taillights of Jason's Range Rover fade into the mist at the bottom of the hill. They were speeding, probably racing to a bar to toast their victory, or to a club to spend money they did not have. They were celebrating the conquest of a castle that was already crumbling beneath their feet. I turned back to the empty dining room. The house felt contaminated. The air was thick with their greed and the lingering scent of cheap perfume and betrayal. I picked up the small black recorder from the hydrangea centerpiece. It was warm to the touch. The little red light was still blinking a steady heartbeat of evidence. I pressed stop. I ejected the memory card. It was smaller than a postage stamp, but it contained the weight of a felony conviction. I walked to my study, my cane hitting the floor with a purposeful rhythm. There was no limp in my step now. The performance was over. The frail old man had left the building. I sat behind my mahogany desk, the one Beatrice had bought me when I made partner at the firm, and I picked up the phone. I dialed Solomon's private line. He picked up on the first ring. "It is done," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Did they sign?" Solomon asked. "They signed," I confirmed, "and they talked." "God, did they talk, Solomon? I have it all. The forgery of the bank logs, the bribe to Dr. Thorne, the admission that they manipulated me under duress. They even laughed about it." I heard Solomon exhale a long, slow breath on the other end of the line. It was the sound of a man who knew he was about to unleash a hurricane. "Then we go nuclear," Solomon said. "Are you ready, Conrad?" "Execute the Omega Protocol," I said. The Omega Protocol. It sounded like something out of a spy novel, but it was something far more practical and far more devastating. Beatrice had designed it herself in the final weeks of her life, when the morphine allowed her moments of lucid, terrifying clarity. She knew Jason better than I did. She knew he would not stop at the inheritance. She knew he would try to take the house, the pension, the very dignity of my existence. So she created a trap door in the trust. Solomon began to type, his keyboard clacking furiously in the background. "I am initializing the filing now. Let's review the parameters just so we are clear on the blast radius." I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, visualizing the legal machinery grinding into motion. The Omega Protocol I recited from memory, my voice echoing in the quiet study triggers automatically upon any attempt to coerce the primary beneficiary, that is me, into altering the disposition of the main assets. The moment Jason forced me to sign that deed, he activated a clause in Beatrice's will that he never bothered to read because he was too busy counting his chickens. "Correct," Solomon said. Clause 44, Section B, the poison pill. By attempting to seize the primary residence, Jason has inadvertently reclassified the house from a personal asset to a trust asset under distress. Which means, I said, opening my eyes and staring at the ceiling, which means the house is no longer mine to give. Even if that ink wasn't going to fade tomorrow morning, the deed would be void. The trust automatically assumes ownership of all real estate the moment duress is established. And since the trust owns it, Solomon continued, his voice taking on the sharp edge of a prosecutor, Jason hasn't just scammed his father. He has attempted to defraud a federally regulated trust entity. That bumps this from a civil dispute to federal fraud. But that is just the shield, I said. Now tell me about the sword. The sword is sharp, Solomon said. I am sending the digital packet to the bank right now, the moment they receive the affidavit of coercion supported by your recording and the police report for the trespassing. Tonight, they are legally required to freeze every account associated with Jason and Megan Blackwood. Every account, I asked. Checking savings, investment portfolios, and credit lines, Solomon confirmed. They are going to wake up tomorrow morning with a net worth of zero. Their cards will be declined for a cup of coffee. The lease on their Range Rover will be flagged for repossession. The mortgage on their current home, the one Beatrice bought and held the note on, will be called due in full immediately. Good, I said. But it is not enough. They stole the emeralds, Solomon. They paid a doctor to say I was insane. That is not just greed, that is criminal. I am already on the line with the district attorney, Solomon said. I sent him the preliminary transcript of the recording you just made. The admission of forging Beatrice's signature to access the safety deposit box is a Class B felony. The bribery of a medical professional to falsify a diagnosis is a Class C felony. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse is another felony. So they are going to jail, I said. Solomon paused. Warrants are being typed up as we speak, Conrad. The DA is furious. He hates elder abuse cases, and he hates arrogant little men who think they can buy doctors. He is issuing an emergency arrest warrant for Jason Blackwood and Megan Blackwood. They are citing flight risk because of the offshore accounts you mentioned Jason was trying to set up. When I asked. Tonight, Solomon said, or first thing in the morning. They want to catch them at the notary office. The police want to catch them in the act of trying to file the fraudulent deed. It makes the case airtight. Caught red-handed attempting to file a document they obtained through extortion. I looked at the clock. It was almost 10. They were probably at a restaurant right now ordering the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, charging it to a credit card that was about to turn into a piece of useless plastic. There is one more thing, Solomon, I said. The inheritance. The real one. Ah, Solomon said, his voice softening slightly. The part they don't know about. Jason thinks he won a house worth $1 million, I said. He thinks he stripped me bare. He has no idea about the infrastructure bonds. He has no idea about the patent royalties from the bridge dampers I designed in the 90s. No, Solomon said. He doesn't. And because he triggered the Omega Protocol, he never will. The clause is specific, Conrad. In the event of proven malice against the surviving spouse, the secondary beneficiary is permanently disinherited. By signing that deed tonight, Jason didn't just gain a house he is going to lose tomorrow. He forfeited his claim to the $12 million estate. $12 million. It was a number I rarely said out loud. We lived simply, Beatrice and I. We drove old cars. We shopped with coupons. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We wanted a quiet life. But the money was there, accumulating, growing, waiting. We had saved it for him. We had saved it for Leo. And tonight Jason had signed it all away for a quick cash grab. It goes to Leo, I said firmly. It goes to the Leo Blackwood Education and Welfare Trust, Solomon corrected. Controlled by you. Jason cannot touch a cent of it. Not for rent, not for lawyers, not for bail money. Perfect, I said. I have one question, Conrad, Solomon asked. The ink. Are you sure about the ink? I looked at the Mont Blanc pen sitting on my desk. I picked it up. I unscrewed the barrel and looked at the blue liquid inside. Chemistry does not lie. Solomon Fresh said. People lie. Suns lie. Chemicals just react. The pH is dropping as we speak. The carbon dioxide in the air is neutralizing the pigment. By the time they walk into that notary office tomorrow morning, that signature will be nothing but a memory. Then we are set, Solomon said. Try to sleep, Conrad. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. You have to be at the police station by 8 to give your formal statement and hand over the original recording. Then you have to go to the notary office to meet the police. I will be there, I said. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my study, surrounded by the ghosts of my life. I looked at the photo of Beatrice on the desk. She was smiling that soft, knowing smile she had when she watched me work. I did it, B, I whispered. I pulled the trigger. He is going to lose everything. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was not a tear of relief. It was a tear of mourning. I was mourning the son I wished I had. I was mourning the little boy who used to build Lego towers on this very rug. That boy was dead. He had been consumed by the man who broke into my house tonight. I wiped my face. There was no time for grief. Not yet. I had to be strong for Leo. I had to be the fortress that protected him when his parents' world collapsed. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The moon was trying to break through the clouds. Somewhere in the city, Jason and Megan were laughing. They were spending money. They were planning which walls to knock down in my house. They were planning where to put the gym. They had no idea that the walls were already falling down around them. They had no idea that the ground had already opened up. I turned off the lamp in the study, plunging the room into darkness. Sleep well, Jason, I whispered to the empty house. Enjoy your victory lap. Because tomorrow you hit the wall. The Seattle rain had turned into a relentless gray drizzle that coated the city in a sheen of cold dampness, but I did not feel the chill. I was sitting in the back of a black sedan parked across the street from the King County Recorder's office. Beside me sat Solomon, looking at his tablet, reviewing the digital mountain of evidence we had compiled overnight. We had been awake since 4 a.m, finalizing the affidavits, coordinating with the district attorney, and ensuring that the trap we had set was inescapable. At 8:15 exactly, Jason's Range Rover pulled up to the curb. It was parked illegally in a loading zone, but he didn't care. He stepped out of the car, looking like a man who owned the world. He was wearing a fresh suit, likely bought on a credit card, that was already flagged for suspension. He adjusted his tie, checking his reflection in the car window. He looked hungover. His skin was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes, a testament to the celebration he and Megan had likely indulged in the night before. A celebration of a victory that never happened. Megan climbed out of the passenger side. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a designer coffee cup. She looked impatient, tapping her foot on the wet pavement while Jason locked the car. They exchanged a few words, probably reassuring each other that this was it, the final step, before they could kick the old man out and cash in. They linked arms and marched toward the glass doors of the government building with the swagger of conquerors. I watched them go. I felt a strange detachment, a numbness that had replaced the anger. They were walking into an incinerator, and they were bringing the fuel. "Are the officers in position?" I asked Solomon without looking away from the building. "They are inside," Solomon replied, his voice calm and professional. Detective Miller wanted to wait until they attempted to file the document. Attempting to record a fraudulent deed adds another layer to the felony charges. It proves intent. "Let's go," I said, opening the car door. "I want to see his face." We crossed the street, dodging the morning traffic. I leaned heavily on my cane, not because I needed it, but because it was part of the image Jason had of me, the frail, helpless father he had outsmarted. We entered the lobby just as Jason and Megan reached the front of the line at the clerk's window. The recorder's office was a cavernous room filled with rows of filing cabinets and the low hum of bureaucracy. There were only a few other people there, mostly paralegals and title officers. The air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I stood by a pillar near the entrance, hidden by a large potted fern. Solomon stood beside me, silent as a shadow. We watched as Jason slammed the leather portfolio onto the counter. He flashed a charming smile at the clerk, a middle-aged woman with glasses on a chain around her neck. "Good morning," Jason said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "I need to record a quitclaim deed. Expedited processing. We are in a bit of a hurry." He opened the portfolio with a flourish. He pulled out the document, the heavy cream-colored paper that I had signed the night before. He didn't look at it. He just slid it across the marble counter toward the clerk, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the surface. Megan was leaning against the counter, sipping her coffee, looking bored. She was already mentally redecorating my house, knocking down walls, spending money she would never see. The clerk picked up the document. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the paper, then she looked at Jason, then back at the paper. She frowned. "Sir," she said, her voice confused. "Is this a joke?" Jason's smile faltered. "Excuse me." "This document," she said, pushing it back toward him. "It is blank." I saw Jason's back stiffen. "What are you talking about?" "It is signed. My father signed it last night. I watched him do it." He grabbed the paper. He stared at it. From where I stood, I couldn't see the page, but I knew exactly what he was seeing. Nothing. The royal blue ink, the bold signature, the underline I had flourished with such care, it was all gone. Evaporated. The thymolphthalein had reacted with the carbon dioxide in the air just as chemistry dictated. The pH had dropped and the pigment had neutralized, leaving the paper pristine white. "No," Jason muttered. "No, no, no. That is impossible." He rubbed the paper with his thumb frantically, as if he could summon the ink back by friction. He held it up to the light. He turned it over. Megan snatched it from his hands. "What did you do, you idiot?" she hissed. "You gave her the wrong paper." "I didn't give her the wrong paper," Jason shouted, his voice rising to a panic. "This is the deed. It was right here. He signed it right here." "Sir," the clerk said, her voice hardening, "if you don't have a document to record, I need you to step aside. There are people waiting." "It was disappearing ink," Megan shrieked. She threw the paper onto the floor. "That old bastard. He used disappearing ink." Jason froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He spun around, scanning the room, his eyes wild. He was looking for me. He knew suddenly and violently that he had been played. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. My burner phone in my pocket buzzed against my leg. I let it ring. I watched him dial again and again, his hands shaking so hard he almost dropped the device. "Pick up," he screamed at the phone. "Pick up, you senile old." He didn't finish the sentence, because at that moment, the side door of the office opened. Detective Miller walked out, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and a man in a suit who I recognized as a federal agent. They moved with purpose, cutting through the room in a tactical formation. "Jason Blackwood," Detective Miller said, his voice projecting across the lobby. Jason turned. He looked at the police. He looked at the blank paper on the floor. He looked at Megan, who was backing away from him, her hands raised as if to ward off a blow. "Yes," Jason stammered. "Officer, I want to report a fraud. My father, he tricked me." Detective Miller didn't stop walking until he was standing right in front of Jason. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. "Jason Blackwood, you are under arrest for forgery in the first-degree bank fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." Jason laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Forgery? I didn't forge anything." He signed it. The ink disappeared. "Check the paper." "We are not talking about the deed, son," Miller said, spinning Jason around and slamming him against the counter. "We are talking about the safety deposit box at First National Bank. We have the video. We have the logs. And we have the witness testimony of the bank manager regarding your unauthorized access to your mother's estate." Jason stopped fighting. The fight drained out of him instantly, leaving him limp in the officer's grip. The mention of the bank, the specific detail of the safety deposit box, told him that this wasn't just about a house. This was about everything. Megan tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She turned and sprinted toward the main exit, her heels clacking loudly on the tile. "Get her," Miller barked. The uniformed officer intercepted her before she reached the door. He grabbed her arm and she spun around, screaming. "I didn't do anything," she yelled, kicking at the officer's shins. "It was all him. Jason made me do it. I just wanted to go home. I don't know anything about a bank." Megan Blackwood, the federal agent, said, stepping into her path. "You are being detained for conspiracy and accessory to fraud. We also have questions regarding the solicitation of falsified medical documents across state lines." They cuffed her. She was sobbing now, loud, ugly tears that smeared her makeup. The guests in the lobby were staring, holding up their phones, recording the downfall of the couple who had walked in like royalty minutes ago. I stepped out from behind the pillar. The movement caught Jason's eye. He was pressed against the counter, his cheek flat against the cold marble, but he twisted his head to look at me. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, help me. Tell them it was a mistake." I walked closer. I stopped a few feet away, just out of reach. I looked down at him. I looked at the son who had told me I was dead to him. I looked at the blank piece of paper on the floor. "It seems you have a problem, Jason," I said, my voice calm. "You are trying to file a deed, but you don't have a signature. And you are trying to claim a house, but you don't have a title. Dad, please." Jason begged, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "I am sorry. I will pay it back. I will fix it. Just tell them to let me go. I am your son." I leaned in closer, leaning on my cane. "My son is dead," I said, repeating the words he had spoken to me at the funeral. "You killed him, Jason. You killed him with greed. You killed him when you stole from your dying mother. You killed him when you threatened to keep my grandson from me." I straightened up. I looked at Detective Miller. "Take him," I said. "No," Jason screamed as they hauled him up. "No, Dad. Don't do this." They dragged him toward the door. He was kicking and pleading, a broken man who had finally hit the wall he had been running toward his whole life. Megan was being led out behind him, weeping and cursing, blaming everyone but herself. I watched them go. I watched them get shoved into the back of the police cruisers, waiting at the curb. The flashing lights reflected in the glass doors of the recorder's office, washing the lobby in blue and red. The clerk picked up the blank paper from the floor. She looked at me, then at the paper. "Do you want this, sir?" she asked. I took the paper. I looked at the empty space where my name had been. It was clean. It was white. It was a fresh start. "No," I said, crumbling the paper into a ball. "It is trash." I tossed the paper into the recycling bin. Solomon stepped up beside me. "The bank accounts are frozen," he said quietly. "The foreclosure notice has been officially filed, and Child Protective Services is meeting us at the precinct. We need to go get Leo." Leo. My heart hitched. He was the only thing that mattered now. "Let's go," I said, turning away from the scene of my son's destruction. I walked out of the building. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of pale blue sky. The air smelled clean, washed of the humidity and the lies. I got into the car. I did not look back at the police cars. I did not look back at the son I had lost. I looked forward. I looked toward the school, toward the police station, toward the little boy who was waiting for his grandfather to come and save him. The trap had sprung. The enemy was captured. But the rescue mission was just beginning. And I would not rest until Leo was safe in the house that was finally, truly mine again. The fluorescent lights of the 4th precinct buzzed with a low headache-inducing hum that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. The air smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and the sour sweat of desperation. It was a place where bad days turned into ruined lives, and I was walking straight into the center of it. Solomon walked beside me, his briefcase heavy with the final nails for my son's coffin. But my eyes were scanning the room for only one thing. I saw him sitting on a hard plastic chair near the front desk, his legs swinging back and forth, too short to touch the scuffed linoleum. Leo. He was clutching a juice box his social worker had given him, looking small and terrified in his bright yellow raincoat. When he saw me, he dropped the juice. It hit the floor with a splat, but he didn't care. He launched himself off the chair. "Grandpa." The word was a sob and a prayer all at once. He hit me with the force of a cannonball, burying his face in my stomach. I dropped my cane. I didn't need it. I needed two hands to hold him, to wrap him up, to shield him from the cold reality of what his parents had done. I fell to my knees right there in the lobby of the police station, ignoring the pain in my joints. "I have you, Leo," I whispered into his hair, which smelled of rain and fear. "I have you. You are safe. Grandpa is here." He was shaking. "They said you were crazy," he cried. "They said you were dangerous. Mom said I couldn't talk to you." "She lied, Leo," I said, pulling back to look at his tear-stained face. "Adults lie sometimes, but I am telling you the truth. I am not crazy, and I am never going to let anyone take you away again." Detective Miller stepped out from the back hallway. He looked tired but satisfied. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, nodding to me, "the boy is cleared for release to your custody pending the emergency hearing. Your lawyer filed the paperwork while we were processing the arrests." "Thank you, Detective," I said, standing up and helping Leo to his feet. "Solomon, take him to the car. Buy him a hot chocolate. I have one last thing to do." Leo looked up at me, worried. "Where are you going, Grandpa?" "I have to say goodbye to your father, Leo," I said. "It will only take a minute." Solomon took Leo's hand, leading him away from the holding cells, away from the wreckage of his childhood. I watched them go until the glass doors closed behind them. Then I turned to Detective Miller. "Take me to them," I said. The holding area was a long concrete corridor lined with steel bars. It was cold, colder than the grave I had stood over yesterday. The sound of my footsteps echoed, bouncing off the cinder blocks. We stopped at the last two cells. They were separated by a thick wall, but they could hear each other. Jason was in the left cell, sitting on a metal bench, his head in his hands. His suit jacket was gone, his tie was unknotted, hanging loose around his neck like a noose. He looked small. He looked like the child who used to hide in the closet when he broke a window. Megan was in the cell across the hall. She was pacing, her heels clicking frantically. Her mascara had run, turning her eyes into black hollows. When she saw me, she rushed to the bars, gripping them until her knuckles turned white. "Conrad," she shrieked. "Conrad, you have to get us out of here. This is a mistake, a massive mistake. Tell them we are family." Jason looked up. His eyes were red, bloodshot from crying, or maybe from the hangover of his failed victory. "Dad," he croaked. "Dad, please. You made your point. We get it. We learned the lesson. Just drop the charges, please. I don't belong in here." I stood in the middle of the hallway, leaning on my cane, looking from one to the other. They still didn't get it. They still thought this was a game. They thought this was a timeout. "You belong exactly where you are, Jason," I said, my voice echoing in the confined space. "You are being charged with forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. Those are not lessons. Those are crimes." "It was just a piece of paper," Jason pleaded, standing up and walking to the bars. "The deed. It was blank, Dad. You played a trick. That is not a crime. It was a prank. The deed was the trap," I said. "But the crime happened long before that." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen, bringing up the audio file from the night before. The file titled Last Supper. You think I had you arrested because of the deed, I asked. No, Jason. I had you arrested because of this. I pressed play. I turned the volume up to the maximum. The sound of clinking silverware filled the jail corridor, followed by Jason's voice, clear and arrogant. We told him what he needed to know. We told him about the aggression, the memory loss. We paid him enough to ensure he understood the urgency. Jason froze. His face went gray. Then Megan's voice, shrill and mocking. It cost us $5,000 to get that affidavit signed, Conrad. $5,000 because you were being stubborn. Megan stopped pacing. She covered her mouth with her hand. The recording continued playing the greatest hits of their betrayal. You really think she signed that access log? I practiced for weeks. I sat at the kitchen table tracing her signature. I took what was ours. I let it play until the end, until the sound of them laughing about evicting me faded into silence. I looked at Jason. He was gripping the bars so hard he was shaking. You recorded us, he whispered. You sat there eating dinner with us, and you recorded us. I nodded. I needed a confession, and you gave me one. You were so proud of yourselves. You were so eager to brag about how you outsmarted the old man and the dying woman. That is illegal, Megan screamed from her cell. You can't use that. That is entrapment. It is evidence, I said calmly, and it is already in the district attorney's inbox, along with the bank logs, along with the text messages you sent to the forger. Jason slumped against the bars, sliding down until he was kneeling on the concrete. Why, Dad? Why did you go this far? We are your blood. Because you killed her, I said, the anger finally breaking through the ice in my chest. You killed your mother, Jason. You stressed her heart until it stopped. You stole from her while she was dying. You didn't just want the money. You wanted to erase us. You wanted to throw me in a home and pretend we never existed, so you could live in our house and spend our savings. I stepped closer to his cell, looking down at him. And then you came for Leo, I hissed. You tried to take my grandson. You tried to tell him I was crazy. That was your mistake. That was the moment you ceased to be my son and became my enemy. Jason looked up as his face wet with tears. I am sorry, Dad. I am sorry. It was the debt. The gambling. I was desperate. I know, I said. I know about the sharks. I know about the 100,000 you owe. And guess what, Jason? When you go to prison, those debts don't go away, but your protection does. He flinched. Megan turned on him then. The facade of the united couple crumbled instantly under the weight of the consequences. You told me it was handled, she screamed at Jason across the hallway. You told me he was senile. You told me the plan was foolproof. You were the one who wanted the house, Jason yelled back, jumping to his feet. You were the one who said we should put him in a home. You greedy witch. It was your idea to call the doctor. My idea, Megan shrieked. You were the one forging signatures. You were the one stealing emeralds. I just wanted financial security. You dragged me into this. I watched them. I watched them tear each other apart. It was ugly. It was pathetic. And it was exactly what they deserved. They are turning on each other already, I said to Detective Miller, who was standing by the door watching the show. They usually do, Miller said. Give them an hour and they will be signing confessions against each other just to get a reduced sentence. I looked at Jason one last time. He was screaming at his wife, his face twisted in hate. He didn't look at me. He had forgotten I was there. He was too busy trying to find someone else to blame for the wreckage of his life. Goodbye, Jason, I said softly. He stopped screaming. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, terrifying realization of what the future held. Dad, wait. Who is going to pay for my lawyer? Who is going to pay my bail? I buttoned my coat. The trust is frozen, Jason. The assets are locked. You have $0. And as for bail, I imagine you will be staying here for a while. The federal charges for wire fraud usually carry a no bail hold. But the inheritance, Jason stammered. The big one. You have millions, Dad. I know you do. You can't let me rot in here. I smiled. It was a sad smile, a smile of finality. There is no inheritance for you, I said. The Omega Protocol disinherited you the moment you tried to defraud the estate. Every penny goes to Leo. Every bond, every stock, every property. It is all his. You are leaving this life exactly as you entered it, Jason. With nothing. I turned my back on him. Dad! Jason screamed, his voice cracking. Dad, come back. Don't leave me here. I walked down the hallway, the sound of his screams bouncing off the walls. Dad, Dad. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I tapped my cane against the floor, a steady rhythm of departure. I walked out of the holding area and back into the lobby. The air tasted better out here. Solomon was waiting by the door, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. Leo was sitting on a bench, swinging his legs, looking at a comic book. When he saw me, he jumped up. Ready to go, Grandpa? He asked. I looked at the door leading back to the cells. I thought about the man I had left behind. I felt a pang of grief, a sharp phantom pain for the limb I had just severed. But then I looked at Leo. I looked at his bright eyes, his innocent face. Yes, Leo, I said, taking his hand. I am ready. Let's go home. We walked out into the sunlight. The storm was over. The clouds had parted. Behind us, the heavy steel doors of the precinct buzzed and locked, shutting away the past. I had lost a son, but I had saved a grandson. And as I lifted Leo into the truck, I knew that Beatrice would have been proud. I had built the bridge to the future, and I had burned the bridge to the past. It was the hardest engineering feat of my life, but the structure held. We were safe. The Seattle rain had turned into a relentless gray drizzle that coated the city in a sheen of cold dampness, but I did not feel the chill. I was sitting in the back of a black sedan parked across the street from the King County Recorder's office. Beside me sat Solomon, looking at his tablet, reviewing the digital mountain of evidence we had compiled overnight. We had been awake since 4 in the morning, finalizing the affidavits, coordinating with the district attorney, and ensuring that the trap we had set was inescapable. At 8:15 exactly, Jason's Range Rover pulled up to the curb. It was parked illegally in a loading zone, but he didn't care. He stepped out of the car, looking like a man who owned the world. He was wearing a fresh suit, likely bought on a credit card, that was already flagged for suspension. He adjusted his tie, checking his reflection in the car window. He looked hungover. His skin was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes, a testament to the celebration he and Megan had likely indulged in the night before. A celebration of a victory that never happened. Megan climbed out of the passenger side. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a designer coffee cup. She looked impatient, tapping her foot on the wet pavement, while Jason locked the car. They exchanged a few words, probably reassuring each other that this was it, the final step, before they could kick the old man out and cash in. They linked arms and marched toward the glass doors of the government building with the swagger of conquerors. I watched them go. I felt a strange detachment, a numbness that had replaced the anger. They were walking into an incinerator, and they were bringing the fuel. Are the officers in position? I asked Solomon without looking away from the building. They are inside, Solomon replied, his voice calm and professional. Detective Miller wanted to wait until they attempted to file the document. Attempting to record a fraudulent deed adds another layer to the felony charges. It proves intent. Let's go, I said, opening the car door. I want to see his face. We crossed the street, dodging the morning traffic. I leaned heavily on my cane, not because I needed it, but because it was part of the image Jason had of me, the frail, helpless father he had outsmarted. We entered the lobby just as Jason and Megan reached the front of the line at the clerk's window. The recorder's office was a cavernous room filled with rows of filing cabinets and the low hum of bureaucracy. There were only a few other people there, mostly paralegals and title officers. The air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I stood by a pillar near the entrance, hidden by a large potted fern. Solomon stood beside me, silent as a shadow. We watched as Jason slammed the leather portfolio onto the counter. He flashed a charming smile at the clerk, a middle-aged woman with glasses on a chain around her neck. "Good morning," Jason said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "I need to record a quitclaim deed. Expedited processing. We are in a bit of a hurry." He opened the portfolio with a flourish. He pulled out the document, the heavy cream-colored paper that I had signed the night before. He didn't look at it. He just slid it across the marble counter toward the clerk, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the surface. Megan was leaning against the counter, sipping her coffee, looking bored. She was already mentally redecorating my house, knocking down walls, spending money she would never see. The clerk picked up the document. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the paper, then she looked at Jason, then back at the paper. She frowned. "Sir," she said, her voice confused. "Is this a joke?" Jason's smile faltered. "Excuse me. This document," she said, pushing it back toward him. "It is blank." I saw Jason's back stiffen. "What are you talking about?" "It is signed. My father signed it last night. I watched him do it." He grabbed the paper. He stared at it. From where I stood, I couldn't see the page, but I knew exactly what he was seeing. Nothing. The royal blue ink, the bold signature, the underline I had flourished with such care, it was all gone. Evaporated. The thymolphthalin had reacted with the carbon dioxide in the air, just as chemistry dictated. The pH had dropped, and the pigment had neutralized, leaving the paper pristine white. "No," Jason muttered. "No, no, no. That is impossible." He rubbed the paper with his thumb frantically, as if he could summon the ink back by friction. He held it up to the light. He turned it over. Megan snatched it from his hands. "What did you do, you idiot?" she hissed. "You gave her the wrong paper." "I didn't give her the wrong paper," Jason shouted, his voice rising to a panic. "This is the deed. It was right here. He signed it right here." "Sir," the clerk said, her voice hardening. "If you don't have a document to record, I need you to step aside. There are people waiting." "It was disappearing ink," Megan shrieked. She threw the paper onto the floor. "That old bastard. He used disappearing ink." Jason froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He spun around, scanning the room, his eyes wild. He was looking for me. He knew suddenly and violently that he had been played. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. My burner phone in my pocket buzzed against my leg. I let it ring. I watched him dial again and again, his hands shaking so hard he almost dropped the device. "Pick up," he screamed at the phone. "Pick up, you senile old." He didn't finish the sentence, because at that moment, the side door of the office opened. Detective Miller walked out, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and a man in a suit who I recognized as a federal agent. They moved with purpose, cutting through the room in a tactical formation. "Jason Blackwood," Detective Miller said, his voice projecting across the lobby. Jason turned. He looked at the police. He looked at the blank paper on the floor. He looked at Megan, who was backing away from him, her hands raised as if to ward off a blow. "Yes," Jason stammered. "Officer, I want to report a fraud. My father, he tricked me." Detective Miller didn't stop walking until he was standing right in front of Jason. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. "Jason Blackwood, you are under arrest for forgery in the first-degree bank fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." Jason laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Forgery. I didn't forge anything." He signed it. The ink disappeared. "Check the paper." "We are not talking about the deed." son Miller said, spinning Jason around and slamming him against the counter. We are talking about the safety deposit box at First National Bank. We have the video, we have the logs, and we have the witness testimony of the bank manager regarding your unauthorized access to your mother's estate. Jason stopped fighting. The fight drained out of him instantly, leaving him limp in the officer's grip. The mention of the bank, the specific detail of the safety deposit box, told him that this wasn't just about a house. This was about everything. Megan tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She turned and sprinted toward the main exit, her heels clacking loudly on the tile. "Get her," Miller barked. The uniformed officer intercepted her before she reached the door. He grabbed her arm, and she spun around screaming. "I didn't do anything," she yelled, kicking at the officer's shins. "It was all him. Jason made me do it. I just wanted to go home. I don't know anything about a bank." Megan Blackwood, the federal agent, said, stepping into her path. "You are being detained for conspiracy and accessory to fraud. We also have questions regarding the solicitation of falsified medical documents across state lines." They cuffed her. She was sobbing now. Loud, ugly tears that smeared her makeup. The guests in the lobby were staring, holding up their phones, recording the downfall of the couple who had walked in like royalty minutes ago. I stepped out from behind the pillar. The movement caught Jason's eye. He was pressed against the counter, his cheek flat against the cold marble, but he twisted his head to look at me. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, help me. Tell them. Tell them it was a mistake." I walked closer. I stopped a few feet away, just out of reach. I looked down at him. I looked at the son who had told me I was dead to him. I looked at the blank piece of paper on the floor. "It seems you have a problem, Jason," I said, my voice calm. "You are trying to file a deed, but you don't have a signature. And you are trying to claim a house, but you don't have a title." "Dad." "Please," Jason begged, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "I am sorry. I will pay it back. I will fix it. Just tell them to let me go. I am your son." I leaned in closer, leaning on my cane. "My son is dead," I said, repeating the words he had spoken to me at the funeral. "You killed him, Jason. You killed him with greed. You killed him when you stole from your dying mother. You killed him when you threatened to keep my grandson from me." I straightened up. I looked at Detective Miller. "Take him," I said. "No," Jason screamed as they hauled him up. "No, Dad. Don't do this." They dragged him toward the door. He was kicking and pleading, a broken man who had finally hit the wall he had been running toward his whole life. Megan was being led out behind him, weeping and cursing, blaming everyone but herself. I watched them go. I watched them get shoved into the back of the police cruisers waiting at the curb. The flashing lights reflected in the glass doors of the recorder's office, washing the lobby in blue and red. The clerk picked up the blank paper from the floor. She looked at me, then at the paper. "Do you want this, sir?" she asked. I took the paper. I looked at the empty space where my name had been. It was clean. It was white. It was a fresh start. "No," I said, crumbling the paper into a ball. "It is trash." I tossed the paper into the recycling bin. Solomon stepped up beside me. "The bank accounts are frozen," he said quietly. "The foreclosure notice has been officially filed, and Child Protective Services is meeting us at the precinct. We need to go get Leo." Leo. My heart hitched. He was the only thing that mattered now. "Let's go," I said, turning away from the scene of my son's destruction. I walked out of the building. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of pale blue sky. The air smelled clean, washed of the humidity and the lies. I got into the car. I did not look back at the police cars. I did not look back at the son I had lost. I looked forward. I looked toward the school, toward the police station, toward the little boy who was waiting for his grandfather to come and save him. The trap had sprung. The enemy was captured. But the rescue mission was just beginning, and I would not rest until Leo was safe in the house that was finally truly mine again. 2 weeks later, I sat on the other side of a reinforced glass partition in the attorney visitation room of the King County Correctional Facility. The room smelled of bleach and despair. It was a sterile purgatory where the reality of consequences finally settled into the bones of the accused. Solomon sat next to me, opening his briefcase with the slow, deliberate movements of an executioner preparing the final knot. On the other side of the glass, Jason sat in an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 10 pounds. His hair was unwashed, his skin sallow. The arrogance that had fueled his break-in at my house was gone, replaced by a hollow, shaking terror. Megan sat beside him, refusing to look at him, refusing to look at me. Her eyes fixed on a scratch in the metal table. They were not a couple anymore. They were 2 rats trapped in the same cage, waiting to see who would be eaten first. "We are not here to negotiate a plea deal," Solomon said, his voice amplified by the tinny speaker system in the glass. "We are here to fulfill a legal obligation regarding the restructuring of the Blackwood Family Trust. Since you have been formally charged with felonies against the estate, you have triggered the final dispersal clauses." Jason looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I don't care about the trust," he croaked. "I just want to go home, Dad. Get me out. The public defender says I am looking at 10 years. 10 years, Dad. I will be 50 when I get out. You should have thought about that before you forged your mother's signature," I said, my voice flat. "But we are not here to discuss your sentence. We are here to tell you what you threw away." Solomon pulled a thick document from his briefcase. It was bound in blue legal covers. The paper was heavy and cream-colored, the real version of the fake deed Jason had tried to file. "This is the last will and testament of Beatrice Blackwood," Solomon announced, "along with the schedule of assets attached to the Conrad Blackwood Living Trust. You assumed, Jason, that the house on Highland Drive was the crown jewel of the estate. You assumed that by stealing the emeralds and the cash, you had secured the bulk of the liquid assets." Jason didn't answer. He just stared at the table. "You were wrong," Solomon said. He turned the page. "Your father was the chief engineer for the Pacific Infrastructure Group for 40 years, Solomon read. "But he was also an inventor. In 1998, Conrad Blackwood patented a hydraulic damper system for suspension bridges that is currently used in over 200 major structures globally." Jason's head snapped up. What he whispered. "The royalties from those patents have been accumulating in a blind trust for 20 years, Solomon continued. "Reinvested in municipal bonds and aggressive tech stocks. Beatrice managed the portfolio. She was a genius with compound interest." I watched Jason's face. Confusion was warring with dawn. He knew we were comfortable. He never knew we were wealthy. Solomon slid a summary sheet against the glass. "As of this morning, the total valuation of the Blackwood estate, including the patent portfolio, the real estate holdings in 3 states, and the liquid investment accounts, is $12,400,000. The number hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the small room. $12 million. Megan made a sound like a wounded animal. She turned her head slowly to look at the paper pressed against the glass. Her eyes bulged. 12 million, she breathed. Jason looked at me. His mouth opened and closed. You have $12 million. We had $12 million, I corrected him. Your mother and I saved it. We lived in that old house and drove that old truck because we didn't care about showing off. We cared about the future. We cared about you. Solomon turned another page. Clause 8, Section A. Solomon read aloud. In the event that my son Jason Blackwood demonstrates maturity, care, and respect for his parents, upon our passing, the entirety of the estate shall be transferred to him upon his 40th birthday. This inheritance is intended to build a legacy for his own children. Jason started to shake. a violent full-body tremor. He read the words through the glass. He read the future that had been waiting for him. All he had to do was wait. All he had to do was be decent. All he had to do was not rob his dying mother. But Solomon said, his voice dropping an octave. There is the amendment, the one triggered by the Omega Protocol. In the event of betrayal, fraud, or abuse against the surviving spouse, the secondary beneficiary is permanently disinherited. No, Jason whimpered. No, no, no. Because you tried to steal a house worth $1 million? Solomon said, closing the file, you forfeited $12 million. Because you couldn't wait 2 years. Because you were greedy. It is all gone, Jason, I said, leaning forward, my forehead resting against the cool glass. It is all gone. The patents, the bonds, the properties. You traded a kingdom for a quick buck, and you ended up with a prison cell. Jason stood up. His chair fell over backward with a deafening crash. He slammed his fists against the glass. You can't do this, he screamed, tears streaming down his face. It is my money. I am your son. You can't give it away. It is mine. It belongs to Leo now, I said calmly. Every penny. It is locked in a trust that you can never touch. When he turns 25, he will inherit an empire. And he will know that his grandfather saved it for him. He will know that his father was a thief who lost it all. Megan lunged at Jason then. She screamed a wordless sound of pure rage and clawed at his face. You idiot, she shrieked. You told me they were broke. You told me the house was all they had. $12 million, Jason. We could have had everything. The guards rushed in. They pulled Megan off of him. Jason didn't fight back. He just slid down the glass, leaving a smear of sweat and tears, sobbing uncontrollably. He wasn't crying for his mother. He wasn't crying for the loss of our relationship. He was crying for the money. He was grieving the $12 million he had held in his hands and set on fire. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. I looked at the man on the floor one last time. I hope it was worth it, Jason, I said. I hope the $5,000 you paid that forger was worth the $12 million you lost. He looked up at me, his eyes empty holes of devastation. Dad, please. Goodbye, son, I said. I turned and walked out of the room. Solomon followed me. Behind us, the sounds of Jason's screams were cut off as the heavy steel door slammed shut. The silence of the hallway was beautiful. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of the end. 6 months have passed since the heavy steel doors of the federal courthouse slammed shut, sealing the fate of the man who used to be my son. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but when they finally grind over you, they leave nothing behind but dust. Jason was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for almost a decade. The judge called his actions repugnant, a betrayal of the most sacred trust between a parent and a child. Megan received 8 years, her tears and pleas for leniency falling on deaf ears. They were led away in handcuffs, screaming at each other, blaming each other until the very end. They never looked at me. They never looked at the empty seat where their son should have been. They only looked at the life they had thrown away. Now the house on Highland Drive is quiet, but it is a good quiet. It is not the silence of secrets or the silence of fear that permeated these walls while Beatrice was dying. It is the silence of peace. It is the silence of a sanctuary that has been reclaimed and purified. I hired a crew to paint the dining room to remove the wallpaper that had absorbed the toxic words of that final dinner. The air smells of lemon polish and fresh rain, not cheap perfume and greed. I am sitting on the back porch, rocking in the chair that Beatrice used to love. The sun is setting over Seattle, painting the skyline in hues of gold and violet, a rare, beautiful evening that feels like a benediction. In the yard, Leo is playing. He is kneeling in the grass, his brow furrowed in concentration. He is building a bridge out of wooden blocks I made for him in my workshop. He aligns the supports carefully, testing the weight, just as I taught him. He does not know about the $12 million sitting in a blind trust in his name. He does not know that he is the heir to an empire. And he will not know for a very long time. Right now, he only knows that he is safe. He knows that when he wakes up from a nightmare, Grandpa is there. He knows that there are no more secrets, no more lies, and no more people pretending to love him while plotting to use him. I watch him, and I feel a swelling in my chest that is almost painful. It is the feeling of a second chance. I could not save Jason. I tried. Beatrice tried. We gave him everything, but we could not give him character. We could not give him a soul. But Leo is different. Leo has his grandmother's heart. The other day he asked about his parents. It was a hard conversation. I did not lie to him. I told him that they made bad choices. I told him that they broke the rules and that when you break the rules of being a good person, there are consequences. He cried a little, but then he hugged me. He told me he was glad I was not crazy. He told me he was glad I fought for him. That hug was worth more than the $12 million. It was worth more than the house. It was worth every second of pain I endured standing by that grave in the rain. I take a sip of my tea and look up at the sky. The first stars are appearing. We did it, B, I whisper to the wind. The structure held. The foundation was cracked, but I reinforced it. The boy is safe. I can almost hear her answering me. I can almost feel her hand on my shoulder telling me to rest, but I cannot rest, not yet. I have a job to do. I have a boy to raise. I have to teach him what it means to be a Blackwood. Not the version Jason created, the version of entitlement and theft, but the true version, the version of builders, the version of men who stand by their word and protect their family. Leo looks up from his blocks. He smiles a gap-toothed grin that lights up the twilight. "Look, Grandpa," he shouts, pointing to his creation. "It is strong. It can hold the weight." I smile back. Yes, Leo, it is strong. I stand up, leaning on my cane only for a moment before straightening my back. I am 70 years old. I have lost a wife, I have lost a son, but I have not lost myself. Jason told me I was dead to him. He was wrong. I have never been more alive. I am the guardian of the future. I am the keeper of the flame. And as I walk down the steps to join my grandson in the grass, I know that the real legacy is not the money in the bank. It is the love that survived the fire. It is the truth that rose from the ashes. We are here. We are standing. And we are just getting started. In the end, this wasn't about money. It was about character. My son Jason thought wealth was something you take, something you are owed. He never understood that true value is built through respect, loyalty, and love. He traded his family for a quick payday and ended up bankrupt in every sense of the word. I learned that sometimes you have to be the villain in someone's story to be the hero in a child's life. Protecting Leo from that toxicity was the greatest inheritance I could ever give him. Real legacy isn't what you leave in a bank account. It's the values you leave in a human heart. If you believe that family is defined by actions and not just blood, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Jason, or did he get exactly what he deserved?